Valtteri Bottas on the second Q3 run, out qualifying Lewis by a tenth of a second. That is, I think that's a function of Valtteri's car control, which was well on display in Portugal. We've spoken about that a lot. He is a very flary driver in the sense that he will go for it in his mind. But on top of that, of course, he is extremely composed and well put together as a racing driver in the way he thinks and the way he can put the lap together. He made a fair few mistakes in the build-up to that lap, but on a good set of tyres with the Pirelli soft perfectly warmed up, you'd have to say, otherwise he wouldn't have done the lap time. There's no question, Valtteri is always able to get a lap out of the car. Whether he can keep up that I'm a tenth quicker than Lewis throughout the Grand Prix, of course, is another matter on a circuit which is really, really tough on penalties. If you run just a little bit wide, bang, you're in trouble. And that's, I guess, it's another point I should be making about Imola. It's, because of the track limits thing, it really is cramping the style of quite a lot of drivers who normally would be out there, like Romain Grosjean is a very good example. Couldn't believe that he didn't get through into Q2. He thought he did a great lap. But of course, when you cramp Romain's style with things like track limits, it doesn't give him a lot of scope to be particularly imaginative in the way he drives the car. All he can do is just judge the exit slide to that point. He's not going to be able to do anything mid-corner, as we were saying earlier. And I think that track limits thing here at Imola is perhaps more obvious than it's been at any track this year. Monaco, you don't need it because you hit the wall, but at Imola, it is really, really draconian, and it's good to see. It's really good to see. So Lewis, P2, he won't like that. And I think we should also say we take it for granted that we have Lewis and Valtteri now in that car, but I think we need to say, thank goodness we do have Valtteri in the other Mercedes, because if we had an Alex Albon, Lewis would be on the pole and winning every race without any problem whatsoever. But because he has Valtteri, there's always a little bit of an issue there as to, can Lewis have the perfect weekend? Can he put in the perfect qualifying lap? Is Valtteri going to do something to which Lewis can't respond? So that was that. Very good lap by Valtteri, and one he can put in his mind, in his record book, as out-qualifying Lewis on a circuit which many drivers had not been to before, ever. So that's a nice thing for him. On the other side of the coin, how important is the pole at Imola with that massively long run down to the first chicane? Probably quite important in terms of grip level on that side of the grid, but nonetheless, they will be in a zone of towing and possibly being able to get a draft going into turn one. So watch this space tomorrow. They'll all be on, both Mercs will be on the medium tyre, as will Max Verstappen, who qualified third. What a surprise, yeah. He could have been a bit quicker though. Red Bull Honda again responded really well to pressure at the beginning of Q2 out on the medium tyre when Max suddenly came on the radio and says, no power, I've got no power. Came into the pits, they took everything off the back of the car, all the bodywork, blah, 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 fixed the problem, and with 5 minutes to go, they were still bolting the bodywork back on the car. Big decision, I suspect, at Red Bull as to whether to stay on the medium or put him on the red, just to make sure that with that one lap he would get in through to Q3, but they left him on the medium. Of course, they have that sort of confidence, and Max went out and did a really, really good job. And it was good, I think, to see the Red Bull mechanics all clapping when he did that lap. You don't often see teams getting into it at that level at Q2, but they knew the quality of that lap driven by Max under pressure on the medium tyre to get him into Q3. But as Max pointed out afterwards, that meant that he hadn't done a lot of running in qualifying trim. He was a bit out of sync with everything he was doing, and to go out and do two really good Q3 laps on the soft tyre was always going to be a big ask, but it was enough, of course, for him to qualify P3. So Max will be there. As Lewis said afterwards, he was really good on the medium tyre with a pretty full load of fuel this morning. So in theory, there'll be a bit of pressure from Red Bull Honda, not from anyone else, has to be said. Reliability aside, of course. I suggested in Portugal that they wouldn't be able to replicate that sort of performance level at the next few races. And I think I've kind of been proved to be correct there. Charles was actually very good, as you would expect when the circuit was very, very green right at the beginning of practice this morning. But as soon as they put on a set of red tyres, set of soft tyres, and then went for a lap time, he said, where's the front end of the car gone? It just got total understeer everywhere. And he said the car was just impossible to drive throughout the morning session thereafter. But they did a very good setup job, Ferrari, to get the car half reasonable. And again, for reference, Sebastian Vettel, 4 times world champion, didn't make it through to Q3 again. It's a short lap at Imola. We're talking 1:14, 1:15, and yet the gap between Charles and Sebastian was never less than 0.3, 0.4 of a second, which in the same car around a circuit like Imola is a massive amount. But you could see the differences on this occasion. You could really see the differences between Charles coming into that last double apex left. The car would be more rounded, slightly more attitude as he got to the apex. And this isn't just from throwing the car. This is manipulation of the car under brakes, the way he's coming out of the brakes with increased steering load. Whereas Sebastian is just doing his normal thing, braking really late, getting the car pointed into the apex and then waiting for the moment when he can get on the power. It's sort of 3 stages, very linear, looks pretty good, but isn't quick because he doesn't have the attitude on the car he needs to get the power down when he wants to. And that's what Charles is able to do. So when Sebastian says, as he's been saying quite a lot recently in interviews, I don't know where it's going, I don't know what's going on, it's never been a problem for me before to be able to get the maximum out of the car. Of course, that's not correct. It was a massive problem for him in the last year at Red Bull alongside Daniel Ricciardo, when all the grip from the back of the car, not all, but relatively speaking, a lot of the grip from the back of the car had gone away, and he couldn't use the back of the car in the way he had been in those years when he won the World Championship with Mark Webber alongside him. That was the moment when, as I've said this many times, that was the moment when Seb needed to think, there's something about my style that doesn't actually add up here, and I need to work on that. And here he is at the end of his Ferrari career, and he still doesn't really know what the problem is, but kind of strange. Very, very good performance by Pierre Gasly. Monza was absolutely not a freak result at all. He's looking more polished, more together, more composed, and more elegant as a racing driver in terms of his body language in the car with every passing lap, really, let alone session or race. Beautiful performance from Pierre in a really good-looking team now. Jonathan Edel's doing a great job there as performance engineer, and Franz Tost has always been very good at keeping the whole ship running tightly and in the right direction. Pierre staying on at AlphaTauri in 2021, I think that's a good decision myself, because for one very simple reason, again, I've talked about this in the past, but if you've got Max Verstappen in the key Red Bull seat, why would you want to cramp his style with Pierre Gasly? We, the fans, would love it in the same way we're happy to have Valtteri Bottas there in a Mercedes alongside Lewis Hamilton. But from the point of view of the team, from the point of view of Red Bull, why would you want to have Gasly in there cramping the style of Max Verstappen? So keep him in AlphaTauri, where he's doing a really, really good job, and constantly showing up Daniel Kvyat as it happens, and where he's obviously found a bit of a sweet spot as well with his engineers and with the way the team works. So very good decision, I think, there by Red Bull. Just speaking of drivers, I guess this is the right moment to do it. Alex Albon's career is still very much a question mark whether Red Bull will keep him. I think if you take my point, which is that if you've got Max Verstappen, you really don't want anybody cramping his style. I kept using that phrase, but I can't really think of a better one. And in that sense, Alex Albon is a very good teammate to Max Verstappen. And whenever Alex says the car's really difficult to drive, or it's really difficult in its reaction to the curbs, or it's feeling really unstable at high speed, you can, if you're Red Bull, you're thinking, well, that's interesting to know, because that's obviously an area where we can improve the car. Max isn't talking about that, because for him it's not a problem. He's controlling the car without even thinking about it. But nonetheless, if we do work on that little sector, it will help Max as well. And so in that sense, he's not bad. He probably is quite good as a teammate, and I see why they might keep him on. They don't necessarily need another Max Verstappen in the other car. They need someone that's going to help the car development and kind of be there and easy to work with, isn't going to complain too much. And maybe Alex Albon does fit that role. Very good lap by Daniel Ricciardo. He wasn't backward in being forward about how good that lap was in the at the end on the radio. We didn't get to see it actually on TV, but it was a great lap for sure to do that sort of lap time. Classic Daniel Ricciardo on a circuit where you've got to be really, really precise, but you've got to be quick as well. And he is one of these drivers who falls under the heading of manipulative driver. He does make it look quite easy, but that, as I've said many times also, is the epitome of the art. So Daniel Ricciardo rewarded by a circuit like Imola, where the penalties are immense if you get it half a millimetre wrong, and Daniel got it absolutely spot on. As you kind of expect, he's that good a driver, and his confidence level is that high right now. Esteban Ocon looked very good actually right up until Q2, but when the pressure was really on, his slightly spikier inputs resulted in the odd mistake and the odd running slightly wide, not getting the maximum from the car. That is the difference. Spikier inputs compared with Daniel's more rounded in and outs of the brakes, the throttle and the steering. And this is something Esteban's intelligent enough probably to be able to feel, although it's going to be difficult for him, I think, with Fernando Alonso in the car next year to understand anything about the way Fernando drives, because he breaks all the rules, Fernando that is. But we'll talk about him in another video. And then the two McLaren drivers, as we've seen recently, swapping positions, very closely matched, but very different in style. Lando, to my eye, has this manipulative feel and gets the car where he wants it to be long before he's thinking of the exit, whereas Carlos Sainz is all about the exit, brake as late as possible, get on the power as soon as possible, let's get this car out of that corner sort of thing. And but they ended up basically doing the same time as ever, but on this occasion in Q3, it was Lando slightly ahead, whereas in Q2, Carlos had been slightly ahead of Lando. I guess the final thing to say is that these two-day weekends are okay, aren't they? There was no problem with them whatsoever. I think everyone would have to agree with that. It's better for Formula One. It's better for the economy. It's better probably for the fans, because it's a little bit more interesting when you know that anything that happens on Saturday is going to affect the grid position into qualifying. And guess what? The grid looks about the same as normal anyway. I think the most interesting thing here is that we are back to a classic circuit. Formula One works well on a classic circuit. And if there are no major overtaking manoeuvres tomorrow, apart from DRSing into turn one, I don't think any of us should complain, because there was a San Marino Grand Prix where there were virtually no place changes. But Fernando Alonso had one of these classic duels with Michael Schumacher. And as Max Mosley eloquently said afterwards, it was the pressure and the timing and everything that went into that following one another that made that a great motor race. You don't necessarily have to have overtaking for it to be a great motor race. I'm not saying that because there won't be tomorrow. I'm saying that because I think Imola is a circuit which deserves more than just the number of ticks in boxes of how many overtaking manoeuvres there have been. It's a wonderful circuit. It's a great part of the world. There's a lot of history. And it'll be wonderful tomorrow to see all those cars accelerating down into the Tamborello chicane. See you then.